Mycki Manning live from Las Vegas with a special report on voter fraud that might surprise you. We've heard a lot of talk about all of the different ways that voters can vote without being there. There are absentee ballots. There have been reports of problems with the machines and them being false. Here's a brand new one for you. Maybe you've heard of it. I certainly hadn't. My show launches on November 16th, but this couldn't wait. This document is actually evidence. I know many people want that right now. They have a hard time believing all of the things that are coming out, and it is hard to believe without facts. Well, I've got an interesting fact right here that has to do with voter fraud. This document came to my good friend, was sitting on her counter the other day, and I just happened to be looking for information on where to vote. I couldn't remember where to vote. So the Center for Voter Information document was sitting on her counter. It was a piece that came in the mail, and we opened it to see if we could find a phone number that I could call to find out where I need to vote on Tuesday. Well, surprise, surprise, this was registered and sent to my friend's husband, Doug. Doug happened to die 3 years ago. Doug is actually still getting solicited to vote. Now, what's interesting about this document, it comes from Carson City. It's actually backed, the Center for Voter Information is a project of Women's Voices Women Vote Action Fund. It is from Carson City, Nevada, so this is obviously a Nevada organization. And there are a lot of voter laws that are different from state to state. What I feel with what this document proves is we need some national reform where this is concerned. Doug received this letter. Of course, Doug didn't, but the resident at the house did, and for the last 3 years has. My good friend was actually about to throw this in the trash. She didn't even pay attention to what it was, so it didn't dawn on her that Doug was receiving mail and being solicited to vote. So this is obviously not a national organization. These are records that were obtained in the state of Nevada. Each state does have their own laws, and obviously one of our issues here that needs to be reformed is that we don't have current records at all on the deceased. Otherwise, Doug wouldn't be able to vote right now. Now, if the wrong person got a hold of this, say they were to move into Doug's old house, they got his mail, they could actually possibly do an absentee ballot. They get to vote for Doug too. Doug's wife, if she weren't such an upstanding and honest person, could have been voting for Doug the last 3 years. So luckily, when we look at the records, Doug didn't vote. Nobody voted for him. But let's just think for a moment about how many people may have voted for someone that's deceased. Now we know where part of that comes from. It's not just rigged machines. It's not just the people in hospices and people that are unable to vote whose families do it for them. But now we have a trail that actually goes back to the office where we know the records aren't being put together and compared. 3 years now. Even if they're behind, I think they could have found time to let somebody know that Doug can't vote anymore. Don't you? It starts out and says, "Dear Doug, public records indicate that you are eligible to vote in 2016. Interesting for a dead person. Who you vote for is private, but whether or not you vote is public record. We're sending this mailing to you and your neighbors to share who does and does not vote in an effort to promote election participation." Almost seems like they're promoting a little bit of bullying by your neighbors. Oh, you didn't vote for the last 3 years? How terrible. You're an awful person. And, well, Doug's not able to vote, so let's take that into mind. While we have hidden the name and street number of your neighbors to protect their privacy, these are their true voting records. The presidential election is Tuesday, November 8th. Now, there's no date on this letter, but this just came here a couple days ago. She had it in the mail in the trash stack for recycling. This says, now what happens here is we will be reviewing these records after the election to determine whether or not you joined your neighbors in voting. Gee, what peer pressure, right? Poor Doug. They're not going to unearth him to go vote. So this letter seems really preposterous, honestly. Now what happens right here is and I'll actually be putting this document in there in the final edit, but there's Doug's name. his address and the blacked out names and addresses of 2 different people that live on Doug Street. Or lived, we don't know. Obviously, these records are 3 years old. I'm not sure I mentioned, but Doug died 3 years ago. So they've had 3 years to update death records with public voting records, and that hasn't happened. Interesting, right? Not only that, but whoever might have lived in Doug's house after he passed, fortunately, it's still his wife. His wife is able to receive his mail, and that's how we saw this. Imagine if she hadn't lived there and she never did vote for Doug. What's interesting is the last 3 years it does show, thank goodness Doug didn't vote. Well, that's good. I have a feeling if we looked at some of the other people who might have received this paper, we might have seen that somebody's been voting for them. Obviously, they're not voting from the grave, are they? This actually compares everyone who voted on the street, shows whether they did vote or not in the primary of 2014, 2012 general election. Doug voted. Well, he was alive then. 2014 primary election, he didn't vote. 2014 general election, he didn't vote. 2016 primary election, no vote. Now his neighbors, some of them voted, some of them didn't, and we get to see all of that. I'm not sure that's really that nice, but obviously it's legal. Now, my real question here comes, now this letter came from Paige Gardner, who is the president of the Center for Voter Information. It might be interesting to talk to Paige and actually find out a little bit more about why these records don't get cross-referenced. I mean, come on, they can check police records from states all over the United States and know if there's a warrant. I mean, we have all this capability. How is it that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing? And we have 3 years of Doug being solicited to vote. This makes absolutely no sense. It's time for some national reform. This should not be a state-mandated thing. This should not be an option for anyone to decide. Say, poor Doug's moved away, and the person who moved in next gets the mail. They could absentee ballot vote for him. There's such small restrictions on voting from not being in the location that's entirely possible. Doug's wife could have voted for him. Luckily, she's an upstanding citizen. She didn't, but she could have. This really leaves a lot open for countless people that are deceased that could be voting. I think this is a great place to start. I'm going to be sharing this document, and we're going to do some more research into it. Maybe we can petition on a state level, on a national level, for reform that there are cross-references within a certain amount of time to update death records for voter registration. This is absolutely ridiculous, and it doesn't need to continue. Yeah, we need to make America great again. Let's start by doing some simple things that make sense, like putting some laws out there where deceased people can't vote because nobody told the voters' councils that they're dead. It just doesn't really make sense, but so much in this 2016 election doesn't. I'm going to work on this and think about what I can do, but it may be time for us to put together a petition, either for national reform for this. Leaving it up to the state doesn't seem like a good idea, because if one state does one thing, another does this, we still have issues with voter fraud with deceased people. It'd be interesting, since there is a record, to see how many of these people did vote, because it shows how many times Doug voted. Doug didn't vote the last 3 years, but there's a record that showed all of his neighbors and what they voted. So all of the people on this block are getting that information. It's quite fascinating. It is public record, which means somebody could do some digging and actually compare and see just how many dead people voted in the past few years. Not that anybody wants that monumental task. I think the best thing for us to do is to call for reform and to create a national law that changes this and changes the ability for somebody to send an absentee ballot in, or for dead people to still be getting mail. This makes absolutely no sense. And whether you want to believe any of the other stuff that you're hearing out there just days before the election, this one I can verify because I saw it with my own eyes. And I'll be putting this in there so that everyone can see. I'll mark out the addresses, but you can take a look at this. We need to follow up on this because this is a huge part of the problem. So let's be part of the solution. Stay awake, pay attention, and let's see what we can do to change some of these ridiculous laws and the things that have been in place for years. It's time for change. And we can affect change if we all come together. I truly believe that. I'll get back with you on this. We're going to do some more research into it. In the meantime, please share this like crazy, because this is a great place to start. Yeah, we may not be able to do anything about the people with relatives that are in elderly care, they're in hospice, they're voter machines. Those are things that are out of our control. This is something we can do something about. So let's do that. Let's unite together, show that we are the people, and let's take back America. We can do this on our own. I'm going to look into a petition, and let me know what you think about this. I think it's shocking, a little stunning, and sadly not surprising. So, Mycki Manning, and thanks for watching. I look forward to hearing from you. Tell me whether you agree, disagree. What do you think should be done? I'd love to hear your opinion, because something needs to happen, and I'm willing to work on it. This is wrong. Thanks for watching.